chapter 23. We've been taking this month to talk about some of the things that we have to be thankful for, and I know Benji mentioned being thankful about that chicken meal on Saturday, and I just wanted to point out, I'm not going to say this because this is Clemson territory, but if I weren't in Clemson territory, I would point out that you actually can't eat tiger because in many places it's an endangered species. But I won't say that here. I do want to just express a word of gratitude, something I'm thankful for this church, especially to our choir and to Barbara for the service this past Tuesday with Central and Bethel. If you weren't there, you really missed out. But Sharon did record the audio of it, so you can go back and you can listen to our choir and to the service. And I think the choir really did you proud. And I think it was just a really special time for us to be together as the body of Christ. So I just want to express my gratitude for that opportunity that we got to share it together.
Our preacher made us proud.
But if you would, as we think about thankfulness for God's grace, would you please stand as you are able to hear the reading of our gospel. When they came to the place that is called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they cast lots to divide his clothing. And the people stood by watching. But the leaders scoffed at him, saying, "He saved others. Let him save himself, if he is the Messiah of God, his chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine, and saying, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who were hanged there kept deriding him and saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation. And we indeed have been condemned justly. For we are getting what we deserve for our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." He replied, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." My friends, this is the word of God for all of us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. Please be seated. Let us pray. Loving God, we ask that as we meditate on your word, in your scriptures, and as your word is proclaimed, you would help us to hear with joy what you say to us this very day. Amen. A few years ago, I ran across an article in the New York Times that was titled, "Can Forgiveness Play a Role in Criminal Justice?" And that story featured a tale about Ann Grossmeyer and Connor McBride, a pair of 19-year-olds who had been dating for 3 years and who were already engaged to be married. And they had first met in a high school chemistry class. And like many teenage couples, their relationship was borderline obsessive and dependent. Also, like many other teenage couples, they would have a lot of arguments with one another, oftentimes over things that those who were older than they were thought really should have been a big deal. Well, on this particular occasion, things escalated beyond their typical scale. Later, Connor's family would acknowledge that he had some anger issues, including some habits and traits that he had gotten from them. It was a Sunday morning, and Ann had stormed out of the door of Connor's house, saying that their relationship was over, that she wished he were dead, and that she wished she were too. Connor went back into his house and found his father's gun, and was standing there holding it in his hand, contemplating whether or not to take his own life, when for some reason Anne turned around and went back to the front door of the house and knocked. He answered it. Another argument ensued, but this time the argument ended with Connor firing a shot into Anne's head. Connor quickly realized what he had done. He turned himself into the police, and an emergency vehicle came and raced to his home and hurried Anne to the hospital, where she was placed in critical care. Anne's parents were quickly notified that their daughter had been shot, and their first instinct, because they didn't know a lot of details about what had happened, their first instinct was, gosh, I hope Connor is there by her side so that she'll be comforted in this difficult time. Connor's parents were on vacation at the time, and when they received the news, Connor's father immediately left and got to the hospital as quickly as he could. When he arrived there, when Connor's father arrived there, he was greeted by Anne's father, who gave him a hug. Anne's father later reflected, I knew that we were somehow together on this journey. Something had happened to our families, and I knew that being together rather than being apart was going to be what I needed. Just a few days after that horrific morning, Anne died in the hospital. And as she was dying, her father heard in his soul his daughter's voice saying, forgive Connor. Forgive Connor. And as he looked at her wounded head and those wounded hands that she had used to try to protect herself from the gunfire, he realized it wasn't just his daughter who was asking him to forgive Connor. It was Jesus Christ. For reasons that Connor still cannot explain to this day, when it came time for him to list 5 people who would be allowed to visit him in prison during whatever time he had there, he included the name of Anne's mother, the mother of the girl he'd shot. Before she went to visit for the first time to see this young man who had taken her daughter's life, her husband said, tell him I love him and I forgive him. Now those might sound like the words of someone who is trying to be the better person, the bigger person, be that person who they're supposed to be, without really meaning it. But he meant it. Anne's parents would go on to meet a man by the name of Jack Campbell, the state prosecutor who handled this case. They met him 2 months after Anne's death. And in that meeting, he shared with them that he was charging Connor with first-degree murder, a crime that typically carried a life sentence. But he also, for some reason, shared that as the state prosecuting attorney, he had a lot of leniency. That if he wanted to, he could charge him with manslaughter and give him 5 years. And Anne's parents' jaws about hit the floor. And Campbell saw this and he thought that they were upset because they thought that he was going to be really lenient on Connor, and so he backpedaled a little bit. He assured them that he was going to push for the hardest sentence he possibly could. But that wasn't why Anne's parents were bewildered at all. They were bewildered because they didn't want this person they had chosen to forgive to go to prison for the rest of his life. And until that moment with the attorney, they didn't realize that there was actually a possibility he wouldn't have to. With some help and guidance, Anne's parents began researching what's called restorative justice, a method of justice not centered on punishment, but rather on finding ways to move forward that allows all parties involved to the fullest extent possible to make amends with one another. And so both Anne's parents and Connor's parents together continued talking with one another and working with each other to pursue a restorative justice process. Miraculously, the state prosecutor agreed to a meeting with everyone involved. Anne's parents, Connor's parents, Connor, state prosecutor, and the defense lawyer. When Connor entered that room that day for that meeting, Connor's parents immediately went across the room and hugged him. And then once they released their hugs, Anne's parents went across the room too and hugged him. Anne's parents then shared about their daughter and what her death continued to mean to their family and what it continued to do to their family. They made clear that Connor's actions had permanently and dramatically changed the entire course of their lives, and not in a good way. Connor spoke and he took responsibility for his actions, and his parents had a chance to speak as well. The group then talked and talked and talked, and at the conclusion of the meeting, they decided together what Connor's sentence would be for taking the life of the 19-year-old man. Today, Connor is about 5 or 6 years into a 20-year prison sentence for killing his girlfriend, Anne. Once he's released, he'll be on probation for 10 years, during which time he will talk to teenagers about violence in teen dating relationships. He also plans to do volunteer work in animal shelters as a tribute to his late girlfriend, who was, by all accounts, an animal lover. Anne's parents continue to visit him in prison every single month. Now, Connor did a horrible thing. I think we all can agree on that. Something that he can never undo or take back. And the parents of the young woman he killed would have been justified. They would have been well within their rights to repay him with vengeance, with hatred, with anger, to seek the harshest possible penalty for him, and to make sure that he never sniffed the light of day again. But that's not what they chose to do. Instead, they gave up their right. They gave up what would have been completely justified, and they considered the needs of this young man who had done wrong. And they decided to give him more than he deserved. They decided to give him better than he deserved. In other words, they decided to choose grace. They chose grace. A long time ago, there was another criminal who received more than he deserved too. A criminal who got better than he deserved. He was hanging on a cross, having been sentenced to die by the Roman Empire. While the Bible doesn't tell us what he had done wrong, or even his name, he was most likely a political or religious agitator, or a thief, or a slave, because those were the types of people who got crucified. And while we would all hopefully say that today, somebody who does one of those things shouldn't be put to death, according to the laws and customs of those times, he was getting what he deserved. Given that Luke's gospel refers to the man as a criminal, and given that the man himself on the cross says that he's getting what he deserves, it seems likely that he had done something that was harmful, that had hurt others, that had damaged others. But what does Jesus tell this man, who even if he didn't deserve death, deserved punishment for what he had done? Here's what Jesus said. He said, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Not you might be with me, or pray that you'll be with me, or go be locked away for 20 years and think about what you've done, and then you can be with me. But today you will be with me in paradise. Not you will be with me in that graveyard over there where our bodies are going to be thrown, but in paradise. Like Connor, this nameless criminal was given more than he deserved. He was given better than he deserved. If you want to be theological about it, we could say that Jesus chose grace. Now this morning, I pray that unlike Connor, no one here has taken anyone else's life, although if you have, God's grace is big enough for you. I pray that unlike that criminal on the cross, right beside Jesus, that no one here today has ever done anything as horrible as whatever it is he did to end up on the cross. But if you have, God's grace is big enough for you. Regardless, though, of what you have done or left undone, we live under the reign of a God who gives all of us, like Connor and like that criminal on the cross, more than we deserve. Through Jesus Christ, God shows us grace. Like those grieving parents whose daughter was killed by Connor, Jesus Christ also had rights. Philippians 2 tells us he was in the form of God and had equality with God, and he would have been completely justified to stay right there. But as Philippians goes on to tell us, Jesus did not regard his position as something to be exploited. Rather, like Aaron's parents, he put aside his rights and considered the needs of each beloved child of God. He knew that he deserved a crown of gold, but instead he accepted a crown of thorns. And as our Bible tells us, he emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness. And being found in human form, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. Jesus could have held on tightly to his rights, to what he rightfully deserved. But he didn't. You know, in our society, we talk a lot about our rights. We talk about our rights to do what we want, our rights to say what we want, our rights to our guns or to our property or to our religion or to all these other things. And rights are important. But Jesus reminded us that our rights are not all that there is. Rather than holding on to his rights, Christ laid it all down so that you and I might have far more than we deserve. You might even call it grace. Now, I began this month's series with the idea that anything worth being grateful for, anything worth being thankful for, is worth sharing with others. And we talked about how, if you're grateful for those saints who went before you and who paved the way for your faith today, then don't just give thanks, but share that gift by being saints who paved the way for the faith of those who come after us. We talked about how if you're thankful for the gifts of life and everlasting life, then share those gifts by enlivening the lives of others. If you're thankful for the hope that God gives, then share that gift by being those people in this world who show other people that there is hope, that God is not done with our world. And if you're grateful for God's grace, then share it by extending that same grace to others that God has first shown to you. At annual conference, 2 conferences ago, I had the chance to go to a session where the Reverend Jim Dant, who is at First Baptist Church just up the road in Greenville, was sharing some words that I think not only sum up Jesus' attitude toward all of us from the cross, but also, I think, sum up the way that God is calling us to share the gift of grace that God has first given to us. And Reverend Dan talked about our infatuation today in the world with equality, with treating everyone equally regardless of where they're from or what they look like or what language they speak or who they love. And he said something to the effect of the following. He said, "I don't believe in equality." Now imagine, you can get people's attention by saying that in this day and age. He said, "I don't believe in equality. It's not that it isn't a noble thing to aspire to. It's just that I don't know how to treat people exactly equally. I don't know how to treat others exactly the way I want to be treated. And because I don't know how to treat others exactly as equals, then I believe God is calling me to treat them in a way that I do know how to do. To treat them better than I would want to be treated. To treat them better than what I think they deserve. Not equal, but better." And the story I started with this morning, the one who was killed, died with wounds on her head and on her hands. And those who were left behind after her death could have justifiably chosen hate and vengeance and despair. But instead, What they chose was love and forgiveness, even though Connor had done nothing to deserve it. They chose grace. And likewise, about 2,000 years ago, there was someone else who died with wounds on his head and on his hands. And he chose to say to the people who had put the nails in his wrist, he chose to say to the people who whipped him with a cord, he chose to say to the people who were mocking him, calling him a king, and shoving a crown of thorns on his head, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. He chose to say to that criminal to his side, who was there for good reason, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Jesus Christ accepted less than what he deserved, so that you and I might receive more than we deserve. My friends, having been given such a gift, celebrate it. Thank God for it, yes. But also share it. Not by giving others what they deserve or by treating others as equals, but rather by treating them better. Better than what you would want for yourself, better than what you think they deserve. Knowing that that's exactly what Christ has already done for each of us. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Please stand as you're able as we join our voices with hymn number 365.
Thank you.
friends, God's grace truly is greater than all that we have done, than all that we have left undone. Because we serve a God who gives us not what we might deserve, but better. And so go forth from this place as grace recipients, as forgiven people, to give to others better, just as God has done to you. Go in peace.